What's so crazy is listening back to the interview we did over 3.5 years ago, you foretold this happening.
Yeah, I know.
So this is almost 4 years ago. And you said, I think at this point you were on your fifth Twitter account, but you were still on everything else. You weren't on too many people's radar. You had a following, but not to the insanity it is now. So how were you able to see that coming?
I think it's just basic human nature. I don't think the people who are running the world are much different than you and I. Perhaps they have different resource and different capability, but I think that human nature stays constant throughout. And me, I run a fairly large empire now. Let's say I have 200 or 300 people working for me. If there was somebody inside of my organization which ignored my orders and inspired other people inside of my organization to be insubordinate, then I would fire them. So when you're running a country or the world, and there's somebody inside of the world that's inspiring others to be insubordinate, then you're going to want to fire them to some degree. And I understood that what they're trying to do to the populace, I truly believe is evil. I don't know whether they believe it's evil or they believe it's good. That's their decision. I don't know their moral backing, but I personally believe it's evil and I stand counter to it. So why would they want me to have a voice? Why would they want me to have influence? For the same reason I wouldn't want an employee in my company to have influence when he's countering my narrative. They don't want me to have a voice. So I always understood this. I knew that sooner or later they were going to just look at me and think he's too big of a problem to exist. And they have to pretend to be balanced and fair. Because when you're tyrannical, the number one thing you don't want people to realize is that you're tyrannical, right? So you have a massive voice, especially during COVID. It was me and you, the number one biggest anti-COVID guys. We were absolutely completely about it. But they have to let some people talk against their agendas, because if they delete everybody instantly, then it shows that they're tyrannical and it collapses. So you have to pretend they're balanced and fair, and they do. But if you reach a critical mass where you're having a genuine impact and effect at a certain point, I think that they just come for you and shut you up. Your Twitter account's massive, and you say so many great things on Twitter. If you had the same following on other platforms that you had on Twitter, you'd be gone. Yeah, that's just what happens. You get to a certain point of critical mass, and they go, oh, "Okay, he has to go."
Yeah. And when they actually started canceling you on these different platforms, what did they say? Was there a specific policy that they claimed that you violated or so on? Because I've been traveling around to lots of different places this year. And in the past few months, I've been to a few different countries, few different cities. And there's been all this, I've heard so many different people talking about you. Sometimes to me, sometimes just overhearing conversations. And some people are saying, oh, it was because of this, or so he did this, or he said this, or whatever. And there's all this speculation going on. But what did they claim that it actually was?
Well, that's a good question. Some companies gave me a reason, some companies didn't. So Meta and YouTube never even sent me an email. They just deleted me completely, and in sync were these massive press releases, which obviously they had prepared statements to release to the press, but they never gave me an official reason by email. So they've never even told me why. And the reason for that is because I think they understood that they're probably going to end up in court, and they want to be able to make up their reason as they go along in the courtroom. They don't want to stick to a reason on the day. In fact, I've heard from reliable sources that terms and conditions for both of these companies have changed post my banning. So they've tried to protect themselves. So that's that. A few other companies, the ones who deleted me, like Airbnb, etc., it was the typical generic community guideline standards, don't meet our current expectations of that. It's all vague garbage. And when you click accept to these companies, you're accepting terms and conditions that are so ridiculously vague. They basically mean we can ban anyone at any time without reason because we decided to. So they don't have to give you a reason, you know? The reason that they told the media is that I'm somehow hateful and misogynistic and I'm dangerous to the world, which I think anybody with a brain knows is absolutely not true. I have opinions, yes, but those opinions aren't going to be out here detrimenting society, not the way that most of the genuine evil that the mainstream media purports out to the children is actually damaging society. The reason they deleted me is because I was massively influential and they didn't like the direction in which I was pushing the youth of the world, which was to think for themselves. So they thought I had to go. That's what the real reason they did it, and they never even told me why.
Why do you think they're so scared of that message?
They're scared of a message. They're always going to be scared of any message that comes from somebody that people idolize and respect, which is basically telling people to be strong physically and mentally and to resist the slave mind and to think for themselves, because their number one agenda is to create worker drones. They don't want you to think for yourself, which means that to a degree you need to be weak, both mentally and physically. If you're weak, both mentally and physically, one, you're not prepared to defend your ideas, but especially if you're mentally weak, this is such a big point of it. And this is why I get so much flack for saying depression isn't real and all these things. If you're mentally weak and you're concerned in your own mind about even living day-to-day life because you find it such a struggle, there's no way you're going to take on a larger battle than yourself. You're not going to start resisting enslavement. You're not going to start fighting against COVID mandates. You're not going to be doing any of that stuff because you're too busy looking in the mirror crying your eyes out. You're selfish. You're self-obsessed. Happy people don't do that. Happy people, okay, my life is good. I'm happy. I want my family to be happy. I want my community to be good. I care about my country. That's why they don't want you to be happy. They want you to be miserable, weak, and they want to delete any morality from your brain because it's a baseline morality that prevents them from installing the slave programming. By getting you to a point where you no longer think for yourself, they can just tell you anything is true. That's what they're doing to us right now, Zuby. What they're doing is convincing people to ignore their own eyes. When you walk into the toilet as a woman and you see a big man and you have to pretend that that's not a man, you have to pretend it's not. Yeah. Because if you acknowledge what your own eyes are telling you, you're the enemy, right? Once they can convince you to ignore your own eyes, well, that's the end of the game, isn't it? Now it doesn't matter if they see the sky is blue because the media said the sky is red. And that's the final level of slave programming they're trying to get us to. They want us to ignore our own eyes, ignore our own ears, ignore our innate morality, because we're all born with an innate morality inside of us. We believe certain things are wrong and right instinctually. They want us to ignore that. Get rid of all of it, empty brains, empty hard disks, and plug in the new program for whatever they think is applicable at the time. And it's going to be tyranny and slavery. What else would they want to program into us?
Yeah. It's so interesting because when we spoke in 2019, and of course, every time we've met in person and discussed this stuff privately, we always talk about there's this fear. People are afraid. Yeah. People are afraid. In 2019, we were talking about people being afraid to speak out. You were like, I'm the only guy who's willing to say this stuff. No one else is saying it. And it's fun. It's weird because we were talking about stuff being crazy in 2019. Yeah. This is pre-pandemic. Yeah. This is pre a lot of weird things that have happened. This is when drag queen story time was just kicking off, and there weren't too many videos coming out of all the madness, which is now on people's radar, which I think is good. Yeah. So there's more pushback and more people speaking on it. But a theme I've noticed is when I travel around, when I do events in different cities, different countries, whether I'm in the UK, Australia, USA, and so on, everyone is saying that they're afraid to speak out. First thing people always say is, thank you for speaking out. Thank you. You're courageous. You're brave. I appreciate you voicing it. I can't say what you're saying. I can't do that. So even in the so-called freest countries in the world, people are feeling like they cannot, they can't speak. There's this pressure that's causing them to self-censor beyond what is a reasonable limit, to the point where, as you said, people will deny things that are objective facts, things that you can see with your own eyes, things that you can hear, and everyone's just going with it. And I think a lot of the nonsense we dealt with over the past 2.5 years, some of which is still going on, it was just that playing out on a massive, massive scale. So how do you think that question people always ask is how did we get here?
Yeah, cowardice is the problem. The world is full of cowards. We suffer from a pandemic of cowardice. We've never suffered from any other pandemic the last 3 years. People are absolutely and utterly cowards, and they do to me what they did to me to scare people. If you tell the average person you're going to lose contact with basically everyone you can speak to, you're not going to have a voice anymore, you're not going to have a bank account, you're not going to be able to make money online, you're not going to be able to move anywhere, you're not going to be able to transact, we're going to wreck you head to toe, the average person can't deal with that, right? On top of the fact that the average person is employed and they're scared of losing their job, scared of their employer. I'm in a unique situation because I'm extremely difficult to hurt. But the average person, as soon as you hurt their money, their life is over, right? And that's what we've got. We've got to a level of cowardice amongst the population where people are just going to sit there and ignore objective reality because they're scared of having this cancellation weapon used against them. So yeah, you're right. It's not that people don't agree with us. It's not that we're not saying the things that everyone knows are intrinsically true. It's that everybody is afraid to say it. And that can only end when everybody stands up and stops agreeing and playing this game and stops being cowards. We need mass numbers of people to say, no, I'm allowed an opinion. Mm-hmm. You know what? Nigel Farage, and I'm not since UKIP ended. I don't even know about his politics nowadays. I don't even know what he's doing. But he said something that was really interesting. He was asked about who runs the world, and I guess the person was trying to set him up for a question about the elites. And he said, truthfully, I'll tell you who runs the world. We do. Because we decide how much of this crap we're going to put up with. The problem is we're putting up with too much of it. The problem is everyone's a coward. And you're right. I get the same thing. Wow, thanks for saying it. Why don't you say it? And everyone is just terrified. And it really is truly crazy because fear has always been the control mechanism of man. The worst things that have ever happened in any society or any civilization since the dawn of fucking records has been done under the name of fear. Get the population afraid. What did Goebbels say? The propaganda minister of the Third Reich. Once people are afraid, give them a common enemy. They'll do anything you want. That's the Nazis knew this. Everyone knows this, right? So it's a basic playbook, but I think it's also a larger issue. I think that things like making sure people are semi-depressed, making sure people are divided, making sure people are selfish, making sure people are self-obsessed. They're trying to destroy people's will to stand up and care about anyone other than themselves. And once you do that, coupling with the fact that if you start to care about others and genuinely care about the world, you'll ruin your own life. It just makes people shut up.